Yesterday, Border Security Caucus co-chair Brian Babin of Texas and Republican Study Committee Chair Jim Banks of Indiana led a group of more than 100 Republican members of Congress on a letter to Homeland Security Secretary Mayorkas that said his failure to secure the border and enforce laws passed by Congress raised grave questions about your suitability for office, end quote. And earlier today, House Republican leader Kevin McCarthy led a smaller delegation of his colleagues to tour Eagle Pass in Texas's Del Rio sector, where they heard from officials at the front lines of the southern border crisis. And joining me now to talk about this and more is Congressman Chip Roy, who joined the delegation and also signed yesterday's letter to Secretary Mayorkas. He represents the 21st Congressional District of the Lone Star State. Congressman, welcome back to the program.
Good to be on, Tony. I hope you can hear me fine. I'm driving up from Eagle Pass towards San Antonio as we speak.
So tell us what you saw and heard during your visit earlier today there at Eagle Pass.
Well, first of all, we unfortunately, witnessed what the consequences of an open border in the passing of Bishop Evans, the National Guardsman who lost his life jumping into the Rio Grande, trying to save the life of one of the crossers. And, obviously it's scripture that, giving your life up for another is the highest calling. And so we're praying for him and his family. But what that shines the light on, Tony, is the absolute abject failure of this administration to secure the border. Now, that's nothing new, right? But for your listeners, just understand that when we have roughly 7,000 people a day coming across the border, and the administration is talking about ending Title 42, then you see what we saw, which is I was on a boat and I got out up on a cliff and there was 100 people literally coming across the river while I was there. Now, the downside there is that Border Patrol then has to manage that and go process them instead of patrolling the border to stop bad guys. And then you end up with things like 42 people on the terror watch list. You end up with 470 gang members that are known to be found, and then 700,000 gotaways that are filled with all sorts of bad actors. That's the reality of the border.
Now, last week, Secretary Mayorkas acknowledged that the planned end of the enforcement of Title 42 border expulsions in May could pose significant challenges for the U.S. government. But he stressed that his department is ready to implement the change and deal with a likely spike in migrant arrivals. What's your reaction to that, having talked to those on the front lines down there?
That's an absolute total misrepresentation of the reality, because there is no plan, and any plan that they would present would basically just mean that they're going to process more people coming here illegally. That's the problem, Tony. I just want everybody to understand what's actually happening. We have a general rule, right, that it is the border should be secure. We should have operational control of the border, and that you shouldn't enter our country without the proper paperwork. The only real exception to that, and it's not really an exception, but a way that you manage it, if you're claiming asylum because you might face some sort of political or religious persecution, you're in danger, and that's a very small percentage of the population, as you know. And yet, that exception to the rule is being allowed by this administration purposefully to swallow the rule of security. So, therefore, we end up with the numbers that we have now, and then the overwhelming numbers of fentanyl and the overwhelming numbers of bad actors coming to the United States. It's all stuff that you can avoid, and Title 42 is one tool. But the administration refuses to actually enforce the law using, for example, migrant protection protocols, allowing enforcement and leaving folks in Mexico while you prosecute and adjudicate their supposed asylum claims. If you're not willing to enforce the law, then we're going to have more people come to the border.
Right.
So now we have people from 160 countries all over the world. Border Patrol is overwhelmed, and Mayorkas is lying when he says they're going to be able to deal with the numbers if they repeal Title 42 or stop enforcing it.
So you really have two issues here, Chip. What you have is you have the illegal aliens coming into the country basically catch and release, going back to where they'll just release them into the country and hope that they show up for their court hearing. But that's just one of the issues. But that, in the volume that they're coming, serves as a smokescreen for the illegal activity of bringing the drugs across, trafficking human beings across the border. That stuff, and those, of course, who want to do harm to our country are using that cover as a cover as well.
That's right, Tony. Let me give you one example. I represent San Antonio. Last Friday, we arrested a Mexican national who had been deported 15 times, yet was still in the United States, and he was trafficking, sexually abusing a young woman, a teenage girl. She's not even a woman, a teenage girl, prostituting her, putting her to the sex trafficking trade. Now, he'd been deported supposedly 15 times. This is because we have no seriousness resolve in securing our border. And to say you're going to just stop enforcing Title 42, which, by the way, isn't just for COVID. You can enforce that against all communicable diseases, which when you have people from 160 countries, there's a lot of them. But more than that, you just need to have the resolve to enforce the law. President Trump did that, and the numbers plummeted precipitously. When the word gets out around the world that we're not going to allow you to just come here, claim asylum, and walk in and be released, everybody gets the joke. The final point to remember is this. 1 million people have been released into the United States since Joe Biden has been president, give or take. You could double Border Patrol's budget, triple it, quadruple it, and I asked this question today, and as long as you're releasing people into the United States, then those numbers are going to keep going up. They're not going to go down. It doesn't matter how many people you hire. It doesn't matter what you do if you're Governor Abbott. As long as those policies are in place, they will keep flooding our country. More bad drugs will come in, more bad actors, more gangs, more cartel members, and we continue to see Americans get hurt and migrants.
It's a neon welcome sign is what it is when you don't enforce the law. Congressman Chip Roy, always great to talk with you. Thanks so much for joining us down there on the southern border. Look forward to seeing you back here in our nation's capital later this week.
You too, brother, and keep up the fight on religious liberty, whether it's in Finland or Coach Kennedy. God bless y'all.
We're going to be talking more about that. Thanks so much. Congressman Chip Roy, of course, concerned as we are about what's happening in Finland with religious freedom, and he's been very outspoken for member of parliament over there, Paivi Rasanen. We're going to talk about that later.